Hello all, Zyceros here. I am just doing a quick video on, it'll primarily be on efficiency, but I also wanted to introduce this concept of reach, just as a general idea for use when you're deck building. So this is mostly about how to judge cards and how it changes between aspects and heroes and whatnot, so that you can have a stronger idea when you're coming from nothing in deck building, rather than when you're tweaking your deck time to time. So I'm gonna focus primarily on these two terms, efficiency and reach, which I'm going to go straight into as definitions. Okay, so efficiency is the amount of effect you get for a given resource input. So the example I have here, Jarnbjorn triggers are more efficient than get over here for damage. Like Jarnbjorn is cost you a card to trigger effectively, cost you a resource, but that's better than get over here's one card for one damage. It's worst case one card for two damage with Jarnbjorn. So reach, however, is another different concept. I won't go too heavily into it because what it boils down to is how high can you go. So your damage reach would be how much damage can you do this turn, whereas your threat reach would be how much threat you can do this turn, and you could apply these concepts to other things like healing and there are other things. Healing would be the damage prevention, healing, max HP. You could apply it to just about anything if you really want to think about it. It's just that the options for those other effects are normally lesser. No, there's normally less of them. So the example I give here for reach here is that swinging web kick has more reach than heroic strike. If you need to kill MODOK, web kick is the superior option, because why take the retaliate if you don't have to? So that's the concept of reach. Like, it's typically better when you're going to defeat something. So if you're going to defeat, say, MODOK, you want to have a reach of 8 for that. If you're going to defeat the villain, like if you can reach 27 damage and there's no drones and you're on Ultron V, you just do that. It doesn't matter how inefficient it is. You could be playing the most inefficient cards in the game. If you have enough resources and your reach reaches to the point where you can win the game, you just win the game that turn. That would be the concept of having lethal in this and other card games. But that is the idea here. So I'm gonna be talking a little bit about like what when you might go for a reach play versus efficiency play, what you'd be including for each of those, etc. So let's go on to the next thing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly lay out some assumptions for the video going forward. So I'm going to equate cards and resources. So a lot of the time that's going to mean I'm going to describe something as one-to-one that's not quite one-to-one. So for instance, Haymaker is 2 resources and 1 card. I'm going to call it a 1-for-1 card because I'm going to call a card a resource. It's not strictly true. There's at least one case where this is going to come up. It's quite important for that case. Because even if you're just considering the resources, so you're not even considering the effects on the cards, the double resource cards and things like Vibranium and energy absorption, the 3 energy Captain Marvel card, actually adjusts how much energy a single card is worth, because it's not by a lot. It's 1 in so for each additional energy on a card, it's 1 in 40, which is that 0.025 there. I'm also not going to be considering attack versus non-attack. I'm not going to be considering secondary effects. That ends up getting really messy, especially with HP, HPs and status tokens, because there's a whole shenanigan with healing being really expensive at the moment with the cards that we currently have, but recovering being relatively cheap. So your recovery is actually a pretty good way to heal in almost all cases versus actually using cards for it. And then flip side of that, like reducing damage and avoiding an attack can be super difficult to actually deal with. Also, I should mention it now, I'm not going to be mentioning any Black Widow cards until there's a section at the end where there's a slide before we get to it that says Black Widow spoilers ahead, so you can watch all the way up to that slide, and you shouldn't get any Black Widow pack spoilers if you're concerned about that, because I know my content going forward is always going to have Black Widow, but I understand, but this I want to be more generalist, and I know particularly American viewers may not have that pack and may not want to know what's in that pack if they don't already. So that's what's happening here. Okay, so I'm going to start with damage efficiency because it's how we win the game, and it's probably the most interesting concept for how this all works. So damage efficiency is very variable. It ranges pretty heavily. I range it from 1 to 1, which is Haymaker, to 1 to 3, which is Gamma Slam at 15 damage. Because Haymaker, as mentioned before, when you can equating cards with resources, is 3 cards for 3 damage, and Gamma Slam is 5 for 15. So yeah, 1 to 1, 1 to 3. Non-conditional damage stops at 1 to 2. So swinging web kick is the prime example. It just costs resources. There's no additional conditions, no additional anything on it, and it will not go higher than its 4 for 8. There are a few other sources of 1 for 2, for instance, Jarnbjorn, but most of the time that's the stopping point for non-conditional damage. If something just says deal X damage, it's not going to be more than twice its card cost under this metric currently. And some of the things that are actually used to differentiate the cards are like how much reach it has, what conditionals it has, and side effects. So, for instance, for a side effect, Heroic Strike has a stun. That makes it comparable / probably better than Swinging Web Kick, because while it's less damage, it's less efficient damage. It's that side effect of that conditional side effect, even because it requires a physical resource. That conditional side effect is quite powerful and makes up for the equivalent of about 1 costs lost in damage. So anyway, I've lined up some cards down here because I just want to quickly talk about them, and I've got the next slide actually has like the actual scale to show efficiencies of some of the more simple cards, but these ones here I just want to talk about quickly. So Counterpunch. Counterpunch I think is really interesting because it's obviously it's based off your hero's attack, but it's always going to be 1 card. It's always going to be 1 card, so its efficiency actually varies in the same range that the other actually varies in this whole range. Like if you have a 1 attack character, it's a haymaker efficient. It's not very good. If you have 2, it becomes swinging web kick efficient. So if you spend 4 counter punches, you're getting the same damage as a swinging web kick. If you go up to 3 though, you actually end up getting to Gammon Slam. The downside though is that the reach is very low. No matter which one you opt for, your reach is very low for a single copy of Counterpunch. but obviously you can play multiple of them in one turn, get attacked once, counterpunch 3 times. That anyone that's played She-Hulk Protection knows how good that feels. And you would probably include it in She-Hulk because the efficiency is very good. It's about the only non-hero card that can reach that 3 for 1 efficiency. So that's really important. So that works really well, just in general. But I thought it was an interesting case to talk about because it can hit all 3 of those markers. I think it's probably worth running it at 2 damage. It's definitely not at 1 though. Anyway, the next one here we've got is Photonic Blast. That's a Captain Marvel signature set. I wanted to talk about this one because it's actually lower. It's even lower than the damage efficiency on it is fairly low. It's even lower than the Heroic Strike I was mentioning before, and its only side effect is that it draws a card, which effectively makes its efficiency better. So if you're not drawing the card, it's really bad. It's 4 for 5 damage. That's the same level as Uppercut, which if we go down to the next one, which I'll get to in a sec, Uppercut actually sits at the 1.25, so it's around here-ish. It's not very good. Whereas the big thing here is the secondary effect. If you pay for it with an energy resource, which I think you would always want to do, and Captain Marvel, your deck is going to want to be built for that anyway. But if you pay for it with an energy resource, all of a sudden you get the card back. You get it's another card, but you get a card back, so you've effectively paid 1 less card. So now you've only got that 3 resources to pay, and 3 for 5 is not too bad. It's like 1.5, a little bit more than 1.5, 1.6. That starts putting you up into this range. Actually about the same as, actually exactly the same as Relentless Assault here. Which is put on here because it's actually one of the best aspect cards for efficiency. Anything between the 1.5 to 2 marker, this is the 1.5, just FYI, is really, really good. I assume you can see my cursor. You can, cool. Yeah. So anything between the 1.5, which is the 1-2 punch melee area, to this swinging web kick is actually really good. This is normally occupied almost entirely by hero cards. So I just wanted to talk about Photonic Blast a bit for that. So we've got the Lightning Strike here. Lightning Strike obviously is interesting because it scales off of minions, not off of... it goes off minions and how much money you put into it, not off of anything else. So it's conditional, but its conditions allow it to reach really high numbers, and even you could theoretically get more than Gamma Slam efficiency. Like if you had 40 drones in front of you and you Lightning Strike for 2, for 1 plus the... So it'd be 1 plus the card itself, plus 1 for the energy that you have to spend. So you'd spend if you had 40 drones in front of you, you'd be hitting like a 30 efficiency. That would be insane, but so would the concept of having 40 drones in front of you. So that's... I just want... so that's something to note. As your number of drones gets ludicrous, this could theoretically achieve even higher numbers, but because it drops off really quickly and it's scaling off minions where you can't have that many minions in front of you, the fact that they're individual attacks makes it mean that you'll just be taking too much damage. Means that Lightning Storm has a upper limit on how efficient it can be, and I don't generally think it's that good for efficiency, but it does end up with like even just 1 minion. It kind of sits in this swinging web kick area, as long as you don't go over the minion's HP, which is still pretty good. That's yeah, that's like the best non-conditional damage, but conditional damage is, there's a few up in this 2 to 3 range that it probably could have reached, but it would have been difficult to word and balance the card, I would think. So I'm going to quickly touch on one ally. This will probably be the only ally I actually speak about for the whole video. And the reason for that is allies end up running into that difficulty that I was mentioning before with healing. Recover, if recover is worth as much as the cards that we currently have, healing would be about, like, the best healing would be med team, and it's about 1.5 per because it costs 4 cards and it heals for 6. So it's about 1.5, and that's the best healing card we have in the game. And the reason I'm mentioning healing is that the block is effectively like healing the villain's damage off, but then you run into difficulty with, like, how much damage is the villain actually doing, even on average. That changes based off scenario, it changes based off modular sets, it changes based off the it also changes a little bit because preventing damage is better than healing it, because if you hit 0, they're the same until you hit 0, but if you hit 0 you lose, well, you die at least. And defending could stop that. So that block is definitely more valuable than to attack, but how valuable is up in the air. And honestly, most of the healing cards we currently have don't see play, or if they see play, it's to heal allies, which they generally become quite efficient. For instance, first aid on Valkyrie here will be 2 cards to heal 2, which will allow us to do 4 damage. Like, that's very efficient. But the standard use for Valkyrie, just playing her and then using her twice and then blocking, is probably the best way to probably not the best way. Well, it could very well be the best way, and it's definitely high value. So Valkyrie, when she comes into play, she's either going to do 2 or 3 damage to a minion, and then she's going to do 4 damage with herself. So at minimum, she's doing 6 damage for 4 cards, which is a 1.5 efficiency. She could be doing 7 for 4, which is like a 1.75, which, going back to this, which I really should have put first, is somewhere around here. Like, this is well and truly in this is all hero cards pretty much, except for like Relentless Assault here. And pretty much all allies end up in this. Hawkeye's another good example. Those 4 counters on it will do 8 damage. He only costs 4 effectively. 4 cards, so like 8 damage is like here. Then he has his stats on him as well. And yeah, that all just adds up. And the last thing I wanted to cover was Shield Toss, because Shield Toss very well could have been a replacement for Gamma Slam at the top of this, but I feel like Gamma Slam is not as situational. You will take damage, you will get low on hit points, you might not be able to get to 15, but you will get to somewhere around here by the end of the game. Whereas Shield Toss requires minions, and minions I feel is a more difficult condition. It's not available in some scenarios. They also have to be 4 HP minions to get full value out of this, to get the maximum efficiency. 4 plus HP minions, which that could be a problem. It does approach as the number of targets that you're hitting approach, so the X on the card here, which you can't really see on the video, but the excellent shield toss, as it approaches infinity, it's going to approach 4 damage, but it actually is 2 plus the number of cards. And the reason I wanted to touch on this was because it actually shows the flaw. It fairly easily shows the flaw in treating cards as damage, because this one is paid for with cards, not with resources. So if we're trying to see when it gets to 3 efficiency, so the same as Gamma Slam under our current system, that would mean that it would only need to hit about 6 targets for 4 damage each. That is attainable. Like mutagen formula, you could get 6 targets in like that last stage, or in a multiplayer game when he flips to stage 3 and there's all those cards going around. You could easily get to 6 there. But even if we do like worst case, you've added you've got the 3 basic dual resource cards in your deck, and we started counting for that. So all of a sudden, instead of being a card being worth 1, it's being worth about 1.075. So 3/40ths more resources for those cards. We're not even considering we're still not considering the effects of the cards that we could have drawn. Yeah, even if you just add that tiny amount, like 3/40ths of a resource to each card that you could, each card in hand, to the value of each card in hand, all of a sudden it jumps up from 6 targets needed to 8.03, roughly. So you actually need 9 to surpass Gamma Slam at that point, and like that's a 33% increase, and that's not even accounting for deck thinning. When I started accounting for deck thinning, to get to the same, to get to that point where you're doing 3 for 1, you needed to get to so I was doing a fairly extreme deck thinning where I was saying that I had 20 of my cards on the table. Right, that's obviously a lot of cards, particularly in Captain America's set, where he has a lot that don't stay in play. But if you had 20 of your cards in play, you would actually need 11.73, roughly. There's some more decimal points after that in order to do it. So you'd actually have to do 12. So that's a pretty significant difference, and that's just talking about just having the basic cards, not even talking about power of aspect cards, because the power of aspect cards, you have to kind of consider the percentage chance that they're going to hit an aspect card and get the double value, which was a little bit too in depth, a little bit too much for this. I wanted something that was something that was easy for people to think about and discuss, which is why we're doing this one card for 1 resource thing, because the math turns out super easy. It's something you can normally do in your head, and it just happens to, it's something that you can normally do in your head, and it's something that's easier to discuss because the numbers aren't getting super weird. Like 8.03 on the first deck pass with just the basic resources added to the deck, that's ludicrous. I wouldn't want to be talking about these numbers, although it's very close to 8. But if I'm going to go and start considering these tiny points, these 40ths of a resource, you kind of need to start talking about these decimals, and it's I don't think it's worth it. Even though in this particular case, Shield Toss's particular case, it does make a fairly big difference if you do start considering cards to not be equal to resources. Anyway, I touched on this before as well, but this is I'm calling it I call it the Gamma Maker scale, but it's just like I just wanted to show the scale that we have for damage currently. So Gamma Slams up here at the top end. You can, as mentioned, you can technically go beyond it, but I think every damage source that goes beyond it currently is an AOE, an area of effect hitting all the minions things. So it's all based off number of minions, which you cannot control, and you want to have under control in your normal game. There's very few. I don't think there's another option that can do even this level of efficiency, even situationally. Repulsor Blast hits for 2 and has a maximum of 12 additional damage, so it can hit for 13 for 2. So that would be one of the only cases where it can go over this. Repulsor Blast though can go basically anywhere along here, and because it's so variable, I didn't want to put it as, I wanted this to be a fixed point. Gamma Slam's never going to get better than 15, so that's why I put that at the high end, because it's super efficient when you're super damaged. So it's really good to showcase the conditional. Swinging Web Kick is there because it's the top end of the non-conditional damages. It made sense for it to be here, and if it wasn't here, there's other cards that make that same amount, like Jarnbjorn, which we'll get to, which I've got an actual slide focusing on in a minute, and Haymaker's the very bottom here. Now, the reason I put Haymaker at the very bottom is because it's available to everyone. It provides reach, but doesn't provide efficiency. So in non-aggression decks, there is very few ways to deal damage outside of your hero set. So most people's hero sets have damage in them. It's actually probably the most common effect in a hero set is some way to deal damage. So if a character was released that had no damage in their hero set, if they were not playing aggression, they would only have their basic stats, their allies, and Haymaker to deal damage for the most part. So Haymaker is, I think, the best example of a reach card because it is super inefficient, but it allows you to create situations, speed up your game, and create situations where you can beat something that you wouldn't normally, where you can defeat something that you wouldn't normally be able to that turn. For instance, let's say I'm playing Spider-Man. I've drawn one Swinging Web Kick. I've got a Haymaker in hand, and he's on 13 hit points. If I didn't have that Haymaker, I would not have that reach. If he's on 13 and I don't have the Swinging Web Kick, maybe and I'm already exhausted for whatever else I needed to do that turn, maybe I still play the Haymaker because that means my reach next turn, if I do draw the Swinging Web Kick, could be enough to actually win between the Swinging Web Kick and the 2 damage on Spider-Man's attack. So in that situation, Haymaker starts looking super good despite the fact it's super inefficient. And so I'm just going to quickly go over some of these other ones that I put on here. So I put Big Hands here. The reason I put Big Hands here is to try and show just the standard efficiency of cards. So Big Hands is relatively efficient for damage, but it's also one of the only low-cost damage cards. There's like, get over here, Big Hands, 1-2 Punch, and Relentless Assault, and Haymaker are the only like non-conditional. 1-2 is a little conditional, but not overly. They're like the only non-conditional damage cards. And Relentless Assault's conditional on requiring a minion. But Big Hands is one of the highest of those efficiency wise, besides these two that are a little bit conditional, and it only clocks in at like a 1.3, whereas Melee and 1-2 Punch both clock in at 1.5, doing 4 for 6 and 3 for 2. And one important thing with the 1-2 Punch is if you are playing aggression and you do put in, and you've got a combat training on yourself, all of a sudden it moves from here all the way to here. It's the halfway point. Relentless Assault is also kind of important to mention because I think that's probably one of the best cards in aggression because it is super efficient. It does what aggression wants to do, but it's just like a very high efficiency for it, sitting at, what is it, 3 for 5, so 1.4. 1.4. Did I mess that up? Did I put this in the wrong spot? 3 for 5. No, 1.6. 1.6. Sorry, I got it in the right spot. Knew there was a reason it was on this side. I should have noted down these numbers. Yeah, so 1.6. There's these two are actually like the two highest aggression cards for damage efficiency. The uppercut sits about here. Because it's 4 for 5, so it's 1.25. It actually sits below Big Hands. Sits like over the top of the Haymaker. That's why I didn't include it. But this ends up like this scale here allows you to I put in to help people visualize things. So yeah, I would say anything from the 1.5 mark to the 2 mark is pretty good. That's probably a fairly efficient damage card because at that point you're talking about like the top cards of the aggression aspect and a lot of most hero cards. Anything in there is really good. Anything down here, it kind of depends. I often don't play uppercut. Like I often put it in my deck because of other reasons. I often put a Jarnbjorn in my deck to not Jarnbjorn, uppercut in my deck to give me the reach, so that I can actually try and hit, say 7-8 damage on a turn, so that I can end the game sooner. But it's not actually very efficient. Which I feel like if you are looking at aggression decks and they're not running, they're often just running it for the physical resource on it nowadays, and that's because of the lack of efficiency on it. It feels like a card that should be super efficient, and I think that's part of the problem aggression has, is that it sits in this 1.5 mark with only a few cards, and that should probably be about where they're sitting, just in general, to make them just even slightly competitive with the hero cards that we have. Anyway, regardless of that, I'm going to quickly go over some of this. There's actually not that many cards that sit in this section. The swinging web kick section. There's Wakanda Forever. A fully built Wakanda Forever can do anywhere between 4, which puts it here, and 6 damage, which puts it here. So obviously you had to set up those resources so they're not actually as efficient as it says here. You had to because you had to set up this, but as you play enough Wakanda Forevers, it slowly approaches this. And there's 5 in the deck. There's a lot of Wakanda Forevers that you get to play. So that is a very good efficiency, and there's as I mentioned, there's only a few cards that sit up here. It's these two, the AoE and Repulsor Blast. I could not put Repulsor Blast on here. It's way too variable. There's no way I could accurately pin that down. But the Supersonic Punch here. That one I can pin down. You will never play Supersonic Punch for the 4 damage if you can avoid it. Like, you do not, like, you might play it to kill a guard minion or something if it needs exactly 4 and you've got no other way to do it. I generally prefer to just go aerial and use 2 gauntlets, but that's me. This here though, 3 for 8 is like 2.6. Yeah, it's like a 2.6 efficiency. It's super good. That's why it's up here. It's only, I think it's, besides AoE, minion requiring cards, and Wakanda Forever when you're just going all in with the Panther Claws, this card is up here with the damage of these. Like, these are the 3 most efficient damage cards in the game. So yeah, Aerial, Supersonic, Wakanda Forever when you're fully built, and Gamma Slam when you're on 15 damage. They're just so efficient for resources. Yeah, Repulsor Blast if you get if you can consistently Repulsor Blast at anything 5 or up is in this is above this Swinging Web Kick, so that's in here too. It's part of what makes Iron Man so good, is those 2 cards both are incredibly efficient for what they do. So anyway, yeah. So this is my Gamma Maker scale. It's just a way to help visualize efficiency and how it works. Once again, there's not a lot in this second half. It's mostly in this first half, and anything above the 1/4 mark should be considered pretty good, pretty efficient. Let's go to the next one. So I also wanted to quickly touch on threat efficiency. I've got some cases that I want to look at in a little bit more depth after this, but they kind of have to touch on threat efficiency, so I needed to mention it first. But there's no I don't have a scale after this slide. This is all that I have on this. So it's significantly more constant. For Justice is the most efficient at 3 for 4 if you use the mental kicker. So if you get if you pay for it with a mental resource, it goes up to 4. It's normally 3 for 3. That's still pretty good, because that's what almost all of them are. They are almost all threat removal cards are 1 for 1. They're just all set around these different things of reach, conditions, and side effects. So, for instance, for Justice is really good because it has a reach of 4. There's almost no cards that even have that reach. That's very, very good. Whereas conditionals like Crisis Addiction and Under Surveillance are fairly conditional. Side effects, I don't think we have any side effect threat removal cards yet, but that'll be something that, oh wait, we do, but I said I wasn't going to mention the Black Widow pack, so it's not, we effectively don't. There's, not a lot of side effects on these cards, they're mostly threat removals. So, let's start with the Under Surveillance. I'm going to quickly go over that one. So it's 2 for effectively 4, but it doesn't actually remove it. It just ups it, but it's also effectively unique, because you can only play one of this on the main scheme. So it's it's also conditional because it has to go on the main scheme. It can't go on a side scheme. So that's why I say it's conditional, and that's why it's okay for it to be 3 for 4, because that would generally break this 1 for 1, which almost all threat removal cards are 1 for 1. It's just the conditional ones can be a little bit higher. Speaking of the conditional ones, Chase Them Down. when you kill a minion, remove 2. That's obviously not 1 for 1. You use 1 card to remove 2. Big things with this, its reach is pretty low. If you need to remove 4 or 5 threat this turn, it's really hard to do with Chase Them Down. Miss Marvel is about the only one that can do it. We'll get to her in a moment. But the Chase Them Down is super efficient when you can play it, and I would think if you didn't have to spend it, you would, like, if you have 1 card left in hand, you would 100% keep the Chase Them Down and play it, like, every time, because it is so efficient at threat removal, and threat removal is normally expensive. But it shows off, like, I don't consider Chase Them Down to be like a super overpowered card. It's despite the fact it's in aggression, which is an aspect that has no other threat removal. They don't even have an ally that has 2 thwart on it. So the you would think Chase Them Down would be super OP because it's in the wrong aspect, etc. But it's not, because of the condition. The condition keeps it in line and allows it to be super efficient when it can go off, but because you can't always get it off, and because it's an event, you don't want it clogging your hand. It actually, because it will clog your hand if you wanted to hold on to it. It's okay with it being 2 for 1. Interrogation Room, which is the Justice card that removes 1 when you kill a minion once per turn. That is a perfect example of, and that's like 2 cards to remove 1 threat, so you have to kill at least 2 minions for it to even break even with a normal event card. That's actually just a perfect example of what this card, what Chase Them Down would look like if it stayed in play. Now I wanted, so yeah, next one here, Legal Practice. I'm mentioning this one because this gets a bad rap for being super inefficient, but it is actually 1 for 1, and it has a fairly high reach. The problem is that you normally just don't, like, it's not quite 1 for 1. It's 1 less. It's 1 for 1. It's like X for X minus 1. It's just, you normally just don't have a ton of cards to throw away. If you could get infinite cards, you'd play this like every time. And even in the current state of the game where you can't get infinite cards, there are quite a few opportunities where it is incredibly valuable to play this card. For instance, Rhino, turn 1. If you can get rid of Breaking and Taking, and this is your only way to do it, is to play Legal Practice for 3 cards, and then you just play with the last. That would leave you with 2 cards on in She-Hulk's hand, and you can do something with those last 2 cards. That is actually a pretty strong play, because it means you're not getting an extra encounter card on turn 1, and I don't want an extra encounter card turn 1. That's rough. And the Alter Ego downside here is not that big, not as big, because you're She-Hulk and you kind of want to flip every turn anyway. So Crisis and Addictions here, because it's a conditional, it's really nice to show off that conditional space again. So it's 3 cards for 2, but then you can also get 2 on another one if you're Aerial. So it requires Aerial and a second main scheme, but it goes up to this 3 for 4 again, instead of 1 for 1. It's actually not that great if you aren't Aerial and don't have another scheme, but it gets away with it because of the energy icon and the way Captain Marvel's set works, where you cycle your inefficient, you cycle your conditional energy cards to find something else. It's also one thing to note, Emergency, most people would probably consider it a bad card. Most people wouldn't put it in any decks outside of core set. You might notice I didn't actually put it on here, and I don't have a scale for this one, as mentioned before. So the Emergency is 1 for 1. So if emergency is 1-for-1, then why is emergency a bad card? And it's all got to do with reach. In threat, reach is the reach of your threat removal is much more important than your actual. It's also conditional, but yeah, it's conditional 1-for-1, but the condition's not that hard to meet. Where I was going with that was the reach of your fraught events is so much more important than your efficiency on them, because all the efficiencies are very similar. You just want them to be able to remove a lot. So for Justice, really strong, removes 4. Like Iron Man's full suit is really strong because it can remove 5. And then you can do events and stuff on top of that to remove more. So that's where I stand on emergency, and why, despite meeting this normal requirement of 1-for-1 for threat removal, it's not very, like, it's 1-for-1, it's basic, but it's not very good despite that. Whereas these are all, besides Chase Them Down, pretty much every threat removal card is Justice, and a couple in the hero sets. Anyway, now we get to Superhuman Law Division. Superhuman Law Division, once it's in play, is 2-for-1. The problem is it costs two cards to go down, one to pay for it and one itself. So that's how this gets away with being so efficient. It is actually very efficient. It's a very strong threat removal card, but it's only usable in Alter Ego, so you're putting more threat down when you do it, because you did it effectively, because you'll flip into Alter Ego and then they'll scheme instead of attack, which isn't the end of the world if you can handle the threat, although She-Hulk's not particularly good at it. But the fact of the matter is, it also takes a while to get closer to that 2 points that makes this really good. The first card you remove, you will have spent 3 cards and you would have removed 2 threat. You are actually down at that point. The second one you're going to get, it's going to be 4-4. That's when you hit the 1-to-1 point. The next one's 6-5. You start looking at, you're up a little bit at that point. One after that's 8-6. You're looking at like 1.25, and it slowly over time, as the number of uses approaches infinite, approaches 2. But it's fairly slow. But definitely worth it. It's a strong card, and it removes a lot of threat over the course of the game. So that was just talking about threat removals, 1-for-1. I think the one thing to note, I believe Team Covenant, in their beginner's guide that they did that they sent out with their pre-order core sets, mentioned threat being 1-for-1 and damage being 1.5 to 1, so that's the equivalent of about 2-for-3, which is this point here. So it's in line even now with that, with these efficiency ratings. We've just got some more conditional offerings. So that's still that balance point still seems to be the case, which is good to note. Anyway, as you briefly saw there, this is the start of the case study style things, where I am talking about a particular character, particular card. This is the only particular character I want to talk about because Miss Marvel messes with efficiency. her shrink and embiggen both completely changed the efficiency of the card that you played. So, like for instance, big hands. Back to the line. Big hands is here, right? Big hands, if it's embiggened, all of a sudden it goes up to 6 damage. It's now 3 for 6. It's now here. It's web kick territory, right? It's actually kind of low for a hero card. That's a huge jump. It like jumps over all the aspect cards, goes here to where you start getting to conditional only. That's insane. But it's also one of the other reasons I want to talk about Miss Marvel is she's also one of the best heroes for showcasing reach versus efficient plays. So with Miss Marvel, the most efficient play, because of you have Embiggen and you have Shrink, and they both really boost their respective events into extremely high numbers. If you could, every single turn you would want to play one Shrunk event, and one Embiggen event. You want to do it every single turn, and that would be the most efficient play you could do. What actually ends up happening, and you would use your hero to grab back the card for an extra resource, or cover, or make random attacks to clear stun and confuse, attacks and thoughts to clear stun and confused, etc. But what actually ends up happening is you often end up using Miss Marvel's ability to pull back an event and then play it again. Whereas the only event where I feel like that's really efficient is actually Wiggle Room, because it draws you a card. So that play of taking something back and playing it again I would consider that a reach focused play. You're losing efficiency because that card would have been stronger next turn if you'd held on to it, but obviously then you lose resource efficiency because you didn't draw the card. But that card would have been stronger next turn, but but you went to play it this turn to try and increase how much damage you can do, despite despite losing that extra efficiency. So I felt like I had to mention Miss Marvel because that counterplay of efficiency versus the counterplay of like doing more damage versus doing damage efficiently, or doing more threat removal versus doing threat removal efficiently, is very core to her playstyle, and it's a very interesting concept. And because she's kind of playing with both of these concepts, that I'm trying to talk about, I thought it was a good idea to mention her specifically. Now, and this last dot point here, larger effect on lower cost cards. I think the big hands is really well designed because it's a fairly low cost card. Yeah, I've got it listed up here because it's one of the only cards that 1-2 punch compared to cost wise, but it's still one of the more efficient ones. Yeah, because it's such a low cost card, that's why it can jump from here to here so easily. With just the two additional damage. Like that's why that works. But other things to consider, I don't have it on here, but Get Over Here is here, right? It does 1 damage, it costs 0, it's terrible. But if you were to biggen it though, it goes from here all the way over to here. That's a huge jump for no resources. You just need to be certain that you didn't need to embiggen anything else that turn. Like if that was your only attack that turn, that would actually be a decent play. But I don't know how valuable that was, but it is something to consider. And future low-cost attack cards might end up being more interesting than that, but they get value off of this, and it's something to consider when you're deck building, even if I don't generally think of Get Over Here as a great card to include in a Miss Marvel deck. It is just something that you could consider for some fairly efficient plays, honestly. The reach is very low though in those cases. Now the next card I want to talk about is Jarnbjorn from the Thor pack. It is I've got it listed here as Aggression's Not So Secret Weapon. Mostly because it literally says weapon on it. So it is the reason, and I think it probably should have existed in the core set, because it's actually the reason I feel at the moment that aggression isn't completely terrible with characters that have enough thought. Because it allows you to move everything towards the center. So so it pushes everything closer to this 1 to 2 efficiency, because it's going to cost 1 and it's going to do 2. So if you're below the 1 to 2 efficiency, it's adding 2 damage for 1 cost, so it's going to push your efficiency slightly up. If you're above it, it's going to push your efficiency slightly down. So for instance, if you're doing an aerial supersonic punch, that is currently 3 for 8. So that's currently 2.6. If you Jarnbjorn after that, it's now 4 for 10, which is 2.5. So it's lost 0.1. But if you did it with Relentless Assault, which is 3 for 5, it goes up to 3 to 7. It goes up to 4 to 7, which is actually, instead of being 1.6, it's now 1.75 efficiency. So it depends on the card you're playing. It also depends on the number of attacks being generated. You've probably seen a Black Panther aggression deck, maybe even seen my Black Panther aggression deck after Thor came out, where they're using Wakanda Forever and Jarnbjorning off multiple weapons. That's one of those cases where it's over the efficiency line. It's beyond the web kick point on the efficiency line, on the efficiency scale. But it can still add efficiency to that. Well, I don't think it actually adds efficiency, does it? Because if you were doing 6 for 2, yeah, no, it doesn't add efficiency. It adds reach. It's a reach play at that point, but it's still really good with multiple attacks. It's better if they're below the line, because then it's a reach and an efficiency play. But that's beyond the point. That's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But the Wakanda Forever, if you play Wakanda Forever, you can now reach 10 damage because you have Jarnbjorn. Whereas previously you could only reach 6. You won't be as efficient. Like, you won't be hitting that 3 for 1 efficiency as you were previously, because you'll be at 10 for 4, so you'll be down to like 2.5. But the fact you can generate multiple attacks means that it's getting more reach, which is quite important. And if they're also another thing, if a card is very cheap, if you can generate an attack for very cheap, like Get Over Here again, which I know I'm mentioning a lot for a card that I've basically never played. Get Over Here with Jarnbjorn can be turned into a 1-cost Haymaker. 2 cost, sorry, like 1 card and 1 cost Haymaker. It's not ridiculously efficient. It's only at the 1.5 mark, but that combo means that you're now hitting for the that 2-card combo means that you are now turning basically one of the worst cards in the game into like near the top of the quality of the aspects of that aspect. Like melee with Jarnbjorn only goes from because melee is only 1 attack. It only goes from 6 for 4 to 8 for 5. It's only going up to like 1.6, right? And you can take Get Over Here to 1.5, and it's 2 cards. Like 2 cards from hand effectively to set this to play that combo. That's very strong and usable in any hero. It's if you're doing that constantly, like every turn or every other turn, and just every time you draw a Get Over Here, you're playing it for 3 damage because you just happen to have an extra, because you happen to have those 2 cards and you're playing something else that costs like 3 or 4. You can over time rack up quite a lot of damage with that. Obviously, Jarnbjorn being unique, there's only 1 in the deck. It can be difficult to find. The Get Over Here's are pretty much worthless until you get that. But depending on your and the Get Over Here's not having the physical resource to trigger off to trigger Jarnbjorns off themselves is kind of annoying. But it's a combo play, but it's one that could have value, and from an efficiency standpoint, I think it does have value. But and if you combine the 2, you could legitimately play Get Over Here for 5 damage for 2 cards. Like that's ludicrously efficient if you combine Miss Marvel and Jarnbjorn together. I don't think it's super consistent. I don't think it's something you'd want to be doing in every deck, but it is in the case of a Jarnbjorn deck, and I think there is a case to be made for a Jarnbjorn focused deck. I think we're already starting to see that. I've seen Captain America focused on it. I've seen Black Panther Aggression, which typically uses it quite heavily as well, and I streamed a Black Widow deck. I'm not going to go into details on that because I mentioned not going into spoilers. That was focused on it as well. So, and I think those are probably the best characters for it, but there's cases for a lot of characters to Jarnbjorn it up. Iron Man could be very good with it. It's kind of awkward for him because he's got so many resource types he already wants to have, but he can generate 4 attacks a turn between Arc Reactor himself and the 2 gauntlets, so you could definitely hit some pretty efficient damages there, and just use the Jarnbjorn and not use the events at all, and focus on a very consistent, efficient damage turn to turn. That is something I think I've played it once. It's pretty good. It could be better overall, but that brings me to the last couple sections. I'm only going to talk about 2 of the cards from the Black Widow pack. If you're familiar with the release model, you've probably noticed by now that there's only really like 10-ish cards in a pack anyway. But so talking about 2 is a decent 10-ish cards outside of the hero set itself and the reprints. So we're not so me talking about 2 is still a decent portion, but I just wanted to and for reference, both of these are non-hero cards. So if you've seen the full hero set but you wanted to keep the aspect card secret, now would be the time to stop watching. And I feel like I've left this up for long enough that I can probably go to the next page at this point. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is Stealth Strike. This I wanted to talk about because it's because it makes an interesting case. It's like Miss Marvel here. It's like the same reason I wanted to talk about Miss Marvel. It plays with both of the concepts I'm trying to talk about. It's both very efficient and very low efficiency based on what you do with the card. And I should probably actually read this. It's on the screen, but just in case you can't read it for whatever reason, it's free cost. It's called Stealth Strike. It's an attack event. It's a hero action attack. It deals 4 damage to an enemy. If that enemy is defeated by this attack, remove 2 threat from its game. And it has a mental resource. So the reason I say it's a reach for a Justice player is that previously Justice had basically the only capacity to deal damage to the villain was Concussive Blow, which is 3 damage, and a Confuse. It's so low, you're at it, like if you're just looking for damage, you're actually better off with Haymaker. Whereas Stealth Strike, being 4 damage instead of 3, is actually just as efficient as Haymaker. So when they have a Confuse icon on them already, Concussive Blow is worse than Stealth Strike. Is worse than Stealth Strike and Haymaker. But if they don't have a Confuse, side effects, once again, not going into side effects. Yeah, so Stealth Strike, it's very low efficiency if nothing's defeated. It's 1 for 1, it's just Haymaker level that could be worth including in your deck still, because while it's only hitting Haymaker level, it also has the second effect. If you remove 2 threat from a scheme because you just defeated something, which includes defeating one stage of the villain and flipping it to the next one, that is still a defeat. Triggers the villain defeated section of the RRG. You trigger the second one, and 2 frauds is worth about 2 resources. So all of a sudden, you're getting 4 damage and 2 fraud for 4 cards, which means that you've spent. So the fraud is about 2. The fraud's worth about 2. The damage now is suddenly taking up the other 2 cost. All of a sudden, you've got like a web kick. You've got like a web kick level of efficiency. It like jumps all the way along the scale from here all the way to here. Like obviously it could go, like if it could get to over here, it'd be insane, but like this is still a pretty good point. Like this is, most hero cards exist in this continuum. Like that's very strong, and I expect going forward we will actually see a decent amount of Stealth Strike in people's decks. We're not at the moment because Black Widow's not out everywhere. I'm one of the, Australia is one of the countries that released it on the initial announced release date, so I have it. It's actually a picture of one of my copies of it, but the general public doesn't. I say general public. The general public in Australia does have it if they wanted it, but the big thing is like a decent number of players are from the US, and they don't have it, so they won't have it in their decks yet. But when reviewing the pack and just like looking over the cards, Stealth Strike didn't strike me as particularly good initially, but upon thinking about it, it does a lot in Justice for what it does. And another important thing is that blue icon feeds for Justice, which is nice. Just I've not generally been impressed with the blue cards in Justice, the mental resources in Justice, so that's just a nice little bonus. Whoop. Okay, so the other card I want to talk about is Counter Attack. This is the only aggression card in this pack. And the reason I want to talk about it is it's insanely efficient at times. It only costs 2 cards. Like, that one cost up in the top left there is insanely low. And it's so it's got 1 cost. It's a preparation, so it stays in play. It's max 1 per player. It's a tactic, but that doesn't matter. It just has a hero response attack. So this is an attack, so you can Jarnbjorn it if you really want. I have. It's fun. After you take damage from an enemy attack, discard counter attack, deal an equal amount of damage to that enemy. So the important thing is that it hits the web kick barrier at 4. You take 4 damage, you hit back for 4. That is the web kick barrier. But it can get so much more than that. Like, I don't know about you, but I've definitely taken 10 damage from Rhino before. Like, you know, he's got double charge on him or something, or even like single charge free pip. Sorry about that. Yeah, like you can take like 10 damage from Rhino, and if you survive that, all of a sudden you spent 2 to swing back for 10. Like, it's obviously a little insane, but you're not always gonna take the 10 damage. But the big thing is there's an the upper limit on how much damage this card can do is actually just 1 minus your max HP, which the current cap on that is 34 if you're playing Thor in 4-player. You have all 12 honorary Avengers on you, and there's a endurance and your helmets on you. Like, that's 30. So you could to take the 33 damage, you'd have to be playing Ultron, and the drones would have to just be out of hand. But you could theoretically take 33 damage, and if you took 33 damage, you could swing back for 33, and this would just be insane value. The flip side is that the cost is effectively paid in hit points. Like, you actually have to take this damage. So that does put a limit on it, and the shenanigans I mentioned earlier on recover and healing cards and whatnot is all comes into play. The flip side of that is counter attack. You are going to take damage at some point. It becomes efficient at 4. It's not that hard to take 4 damage. Most villains, on Expert at least, have 3 hit points, the exception being Claw, but Claw's got 2 boost cards, he's always going to hit. And a lot of 3 pips in his deck, he's always going to hit for 4 at some point, and even his stage 3 has 2 attack. It's not that hard to get to the 4 at that point. You're going to get hit for 4 at some point. You're going to be able to trigger this, hopefully, and you could have a guard minion. And if you can trigger this, it's going to hit for an efficient amount of damage. And the fact that it remains in play, it's not the next attack, it's not forced. You can always just keep it in play until you get that efficient damage thing. I expect going forward, also it's an it's a physical resource for Jarnbjorn if you are playing a Jarnbjorn deck. I expect going forward in aggression, this card is probably going to see an appearance. Probably not in Fayoff because of the max one per player, but you know, 2 copies, so you can get like maybe 2 of these per deck cycle. Like I think that, or even throw 1 away and still play 1 later in the before you shuffle. I think this will be seeing play in aggression decks for a while now. You might not see as much play in multiplayer because of the other players being able to defend for you more readily. But there's still always a point where you take a hit, and that hit is normally more than 4. But anyway, that is the end of this video. I believe it's actually a fairly reasonable length here. So I just gone into a fair amount of depth on efficiency and just some case studies and whatnot. So hopefully that helps you think about cards and how, particularly damage and fraud cards, because this is more about damage and fraud at the moment. But hopefully this helps you think about cards for how think about the cards that come out, so you can actually decide which ones you want to play, when you want to play them, like have a better idea of your reach versus fraud potential, reach versus efficiency, and know why you're including a card over another. Like knowing that you're including a card because you're trying to reach higher numbers versus including a card specifically because you can, specifically because it is efficient. And I think that will help if you. I think that might help some people become better at creating stronger decks. But we'll see. Anyway, regardless of that, I hope you've enjoyed, and I shall see you next time.